you're calling for stopping the grants, isn't obviously you've said that should be reduced to 600,000 by the time we pay the Waitaki Resource Recovery Trust 350,000. By the time we pay a bunch of the other ongoing commitments that we've got to help enable community groups and organisations to do their thing, the actual amount that's left does mean that there will be a stop to funding going to a lot of the small community organisations, etc., because there's just not enough to still share around amongst all of those. So that is exactly what was meant by that. As far as some of the other things you've raised, the petition is, I guess, a challenge to the Event Centre Trust for them to go out and get 600 signatures for people supporting it, because that's essentially what you're giving us today is here's 300. Our overall submissions came in, and with whatever number, and you've tried to double that, and this is the challenge.
That point, Gary,
if I can finish speaking first. If the challenge is simply the number of people you can get to sign and for or against, it just ends up being an ongoing battle. So we don't ignore the views of people, taking them on board, and that's our role as elected members. But we've accepted the petition, and we'll go from there. But anyway, you can comment on that, and then I'll ask perhaps the CE to address the minutes issue.
we're not trying to set up a battle of numbers of support. The petition itself says that we don't like the way the event centre is being funded, that you're looking at, well, it'll be loans obviously, but there's different ways of funding it by cutting back council expenditure, which is the thing that is identified in our flyer. So all we're doing is, we know the council is trying very hard to make sure rates don't jump up year on year. We just want you to try a bit harder. That's all, and find the avenues where you can actually save money. And there is a lot of fat that can be trimmed in the way the council is spending their money.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fat that can be trimmed, we're going through a transformation program at the moment, and that's aimed at making sure that we're more efficient in the way we use money. The council's recognised it can be more efficient in the way it acts and operates, and so we're going through a structured process of reviewing what we do and how we do it to make sure we use all our resources efficiently as possible to deliver the council's stated objectives and outcomes that it wants for the district and for our communities. In terms of the minutes, yeah, I'm not sure the language helps with, credibility of arguments really that's been used there, but yeah, we have moved to a system of meeting every 2 weeks as a council now. That does mean there are more minutes to be produced. We have had some resources leave the area, of supporting council. So, we are in the process of going through a change within that area. And we hope to catch up on the minutes. It's not a good situation. It's not a situation that any of us like in terms of minutes coming out late, but yeah, we are working to rectify that.
And clarification, all minutes will be made available. It's unfortunate that it's taking so long. It's frustrating to us as well, but they will all be available as required.
Mayor Kircher, just a question. I presume this conversation will be minuted.
Councillors, do you have any comments or questions? Other than Councillor Hopkins. Okay, thank you very much, Ray, and appreciate you coming in and sharing your views with us. Okay, on to item 4.1, public minutes from the council meeting on the 8th of August. Councillor Holding, move those. Seconder, Councillor Hopkins.
Second. Mayor Kircher, with if I may, with one very small correction on page 8, under 5.1 council responsible freedom camping bylaw, the third paragraph asked why the new definition of homelessness was not in bylaws to prevent people. Well, the question I asked was, why isn't it in our revised bylaw? So I just think it should say that was not in our bylaw or our revised bylaw.
Right. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Any other comments? put it. Those in favour, they be accepted, please say aye. And against, it's carried. Right, 5.1, my report, I will take it as read. And just noting the councillors who attended the conference and staff, whether they might want to add anything extra to what's already there. But yeah, otherwise take it as read. Any comments, questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Mayor Kircher, I do have a couple of questions, if I may. I'm just curious, the citizens' assemblies you're talking about, or you mentioned here, you contrast a citizens' assembly with a people's assembly, but in each case you say that they're about deliberative democracy. And I'm just wondering if you have a definition of what that means, and to the extent that what the intention of the Citizens' Assembly is at the bottom is to inform policy, it's not to determine policy. I would have thought deliberative democracy is about deciding something, whereas these assemblies are more about providing guidance for others to decide. Have I got that right, or am I misinterpreting that?
Essentially, there are opportunities for groups of people, of non-elected members, to actually get together and deliberate over particular issues. So it's rather than the one-way traffic of a submission where we ask about something or whatever and they just give a response and that's it. There's an opportunity for people to actually be together and for them to have the same debates or arguments or whatever that we would have around this table, but for them to weigh up the pros and cons of different proposals and see what they come up with. So it's not them deciding what happens, but it's them having that broad, that more engaged discussion about what comes to us as governance and for us to actually make decisions on. So ideally, if it's done well, it ends up with better quality discussions and better quality points coming forward, because it's very easy for a whole lot of people to say, I want this and I want that and so forth. But when they have to start weighing up the pros and cons of that and take into account limited budgets and various things that we have to do, that's when they start giving us the quality of, actually, if we've got to prioritise this, these are the things we want, think are most important, and these are the other things that we would like to get done, but aren't as important. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that does. Look, 2 or 3 other things very quickly. Mr. Palmer has been appointed to this group looking at the future for local government, and I congratulate him on that. Are we going to have a chance to talk to you about what we might like you to advocate on our behalf? That's question 1. Question 2, you're talking in your report, Mayor Kircher, about the planning for the Discovery Hub Visitor Centre progressing. Who's progressing that, and when is it going to come in front of us? And finally, I noticed in your meetings that you had a meeting with Jackie Dean about the RSA building. Can you amplify, give us a bit of information about what that was about?
Okay, so on that last matter, Alex and I met with Jackie to talk through the legal status issues and so on, the legislation that is at the core of the problem of being able to utilise the RSA building, and looking at what the options are around local bills and so forth. So she gave us some good feedback on that and at the time, and then sent on some information. So it's something that's been sitting on the back there, and I think something that we need to get sorted. Jackie's obviously finishing up, and it might be her successor, whoever that might be in the electorate, to for us to meet with next to get their support of something going through. What were the other things? Discovery Hub. So the Geopark Discovery Hub is a project for the Geopark Trust, and they are quite rightly the ones that are commissioning that work, and that it'll it'll be something they own as far as the project goes. And at some point, I imagine that they'll want to brief us on what that might look like. I thought I'd throw a few examples of visitor centres and hubs elsewhere for geoparks, because there's quite a range of what they might look like. From something relatively small and not so significant to something very grand. And I imagine we'll probably have something in the middle there. And the first item was
Future local government.
yes, Alex's.
Yeah, so in terms of feeding into that process, what I've been working with that group on is how do we have a process where everyone who's involved in local government can feed into how we take that forward. And one of the recommendations from the Future for Local Government review was around new ways of engaging communities, and we're looking at how we do that as a way of engaging everyone who's involved, particularly elected members in local government, in shaping what local government does collectively now, trying to reach a consensus on where we want to get to and how we get there, and what of those recommendations we can coalesce around to take forward. There are some that I think are easier to agree with, and there's probably a consensus on already, but there are others that need debate within the sector. And so we're looking at a process that engages the whole sector in that debate rather than just a few, and that's what we've been working on, essentially, so that everyone's views can feed in.
But what about us? I'd like an opportunity for us to say to you what we would like you to advocate on our behalf, specifically this council's behalf. And my fundamental bottom line would be choice, that I would want you to advocate for choice. Stop telling us what to do. Let us choose for ourselves what to do.
So the role of the group that I'm on is not to decide what local government is going to say with a collective voice. It's about the process whereby we come up with that collective voice. So so giving opportunity for that view to feed in, that we should have choice over certain things. So I know particular issues around the voting age and the voting system, and so giving opportunity for that to be voiced. And I'm sure there are others across local government that have share some of those concerns as well. But there are other things that need to be debated, and it's about how do we, across all the councillors and others involved in local government, community boards, how do we ensure we got that debate and all the voices are heard in that, so that we can come up with something that without watering down what we need in terms of a radical reform of local government, we can make sure that all those voices are captured, and we have something that collectively we can say, yes, we as a sector are behind that, and we can go to government and others with.
Thank you. Anyone else? Probably just reiterate on the repeat of my column for the Omru Mail in here around the grants. I think there's a lot of concerns with the mailer that went out from the ratepayer group, and it's one of those things where they put down a whole lot of facts, and the facts themselves aren't or are true. Some I don't think are true, but most of them are truths. But then the assumptions they make from those are erroneous, and some of it they're a bit disingenuous in that they only tell half the story. They're very, very open about how much external debt the council has, but they didn't say anything about the $30+ million that the council has loaned out in the community. So I think it's a very disingenuous way to present information when you only give the negative part of the story. So funding and so forth is used, or that's funding for positions and so on all comes from rates, whereas actually it comes from user fees, or it comes from government subsidies, or whatever it might be. So this is the problem that I had. The allegation that we could easily cut $400,000 off our grants and awards budget without any impact in the community. It's just not true. There's a lot of groups and individuals that benefit a lot from that. So, I think if they want to throw allegations that aren't correct at us, then we've got an obligation to push back against that and actually give people give the public the facts on the matter. And with that, I'll ask someone happy to move the receipt of my report. Councillor Linwood, Councillor Hopkins, thank you. Those in favour say aye.
Just very briefly, could I thank the councillors who gave us their reports on the local government conference. They were well written and very informative, and it was clear that the conference was benefit for them too. So it was good to see them as part of your report.
Yeah, I think well, the feedback I've had because I wasn't there was not because I wasn't there. The feedback I had was it was certainly one of the better conferences for quite some time, which is really good because the last couple of ones have been a bit questionable as far as the overall coming away enthused, because I think that's what you generally look at is new ideas and opportunities and so on that you can take back to your own council. So no, thank you very much. Right, moving on to item 6.1, the adoption of the Chief Executive's key performance indicators. And Mr. Palmer, you to speak to this.
Thank you. So yes, this report presents the KPIs for the year just gone and closing off those in terms of where we got to with delivery of those. And the draft KPIs, which are recommended for adoption today. As you may be aware, we set the KPIs, or you set the KPIs for myself annually. And usually we do this in public. There's not many councils that do that, but I think it's important that the public see what it is that you're setting me as the head of the staff that are employed here to deliver. We've adopted a different process this year. One of the ambitions we've had in the previous KPIs was around developing a performance management framework, and that also sits within our transformation objectives as well. So we're using a system called OKRs, Organisational Key Results, to set the KPIs. And the starting point for that is the strategic framework and priorities adopted by council, and working through those in terms of what does this mean for the key measures that we need to set, the indicators that then inform the actions we take and I take forward on your behalf in delivering your ambitions. It's been quite a steep learning curve for us. We're still learning how to do this, and we found it extremely challenging as a team. So it's a work in progress, and I think in looking at what we've got here, there's things that we could pick at it and say, well, we're not quite happy with that, but it's a case of, well, we haven't got anything better to propose. And some of those at this stage, it's good enough moving forwards, but a lot of them I think are there. But we see that in getting to grips with the new OKR system, it's a process of iterating and improving on what we've got, as it will be with a lot of things that we're doing through transformation. We get it to a good enough stage, and then we continue to improve from there, rather than seeking to get something perfect from the start. If agreed, the KPIs, we then intend to cascade that down through teams. Our objective really is to ensure that the whole organisation, every individual, every team is focused on your outcomes and your priorities, and that reflects in the work that they do and their work objectives. So there's a lot of work to do to actually get to that stage, but this is the starting point of that work, agreeing the KPIs for myself. Also, these KPIs will form a key part in moving forward with transformation. They enable us to do that work with managers and with teams to be clear on accountabilities and responsibilities and where they sit within the current operating model, and then how they transfer to the new operating model that we propose to move to in transformation. So it essentially forms the bedrock of forming the transformed organisation operating in that new way. So really important piece of work. I think it's work in progress in terms of it. We'll want to continue to improve on these, but it's a starting point really for our new performance management framework and for moving forward with our transformation. Happy to answer any questions on the detail therein.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillors, questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one comment on KPI number 4. I'm conscious of the fact that we do need to progress and get our district plan signed off. But I'm also more conscious of the fact that the district plan must actually be effective for the aims of our district. And I would be concerned that we constrain ourselves in that effectiveness by putting you and staff under pressure to complete by a certain date.
Just speaking to that, I think the key thing is what the outcome is, which is a review and fit for purpose district plan. So to me, fit for purpose is meaning that. But for something that's burning through over $100,000 a month, the sooner we can get to the point where it's published, the better. So it's not about taking shortcuts; it's about doing it thoroughly, but try and do it thoroughly quickly.
And just for clarity, yeah, that's the KPI, the outgoing KPI, rather than the new one you're discussing there. We do have the district plan still reflected in the new set of KPIs. So I think it's in KPI 6, which is a bit of a catch-all KPI.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, a couple of questions, well, 3 in fact, if I may, or one comment and a question. Sorry, one comment and 2 questions. On page 31, I think KPI 6, all of the other KPIs, all the other ones here under the headings BC, ABC, EF, actions, development, delivery of. D is just a statement, a strong partnership exists between the council and iwi based on trust. I think it should say something like ensure a strong partnership exists or something of that nature. So it becomes an action rather than just a statement as it stands. Now, the other question I did have in respect of, I think KPI 6, if you'll bear with me. No, sorry, KPI, hold on, KPI 9, Forester Gallery. I'm just wondering, picking up on the comment in the Mayor's report about the planning for the delivery hub, discovery hub, geopark hub, whether this the gallery extension might warrant revisiting, because it would seem to me to be a potentially ideal site for to have the 2 facilities in the same building. Well, a possible site. So I'm just wondering whether there's some possible tweaking of that KPI now that the UNESCO organisation has granted us official UNESCO geopark status and talked about the importance of having the hub. And finally, my last question was, you talked about moving forward with transformation, and I think there's been references in your reports earlier to phase 3 or stage 3, but there's nothing in here about that today, and I'm just wondering when that's going to be in front of us.
So I think I think you made the same mistake I did, which was looking at the current year or the year just finished KPIs, which is my mistake when I was talking about the district plan. But
Yeah, so the gallery is in the KPIs of the year just gone. It doesn't feature in the new KPIs. In terms of the partnership with the partnership with iwi, I think we're trying to look at something that is outcome focused rather than action focused. So a strong partnership existing is the outcome we want. Clearly, to do that, we all need to develop that and work on that. So it's trying to have an outcome-y type statement rather than an action type statement in there. So that's what we're aiming for.
All the other direction statements.
Yeah, and then in terms of transformation, I mean that is in here in terms of it being KPI 5, delivery of the transformation program. So that's proposed as the new KPI 5 to deliver that. And we propose to bring forward a report on phase 3 at the next council meeting.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, Alex, the scope of these KPIs is huge. Are you comfortable with the fact that you can attain what's requested or required or stated?
Not on my own, no. So I think it's about striking a balance. I think in the new OKR system, we want objectives that are stretching, but we need to accept that we might not get 100% delivery. And we said in the OKR framework that, achieving 75-80% is doing well, but we want to stretch ourselves as an organisation for what we want to achieve. So they're ambitious, they're bold. I won't deliver it all on my own. I'm sure I'll have your support in delivering these things as well along the way. If I was to predict, will I deliver them all? I think it's unlikely I'll deliver them all, but we'll certainly have a good go as an organisation at delivering them.
Yeah, good for
Sometimes to interpret what you've just said as having a goal that is possibly unreachable, I don't find that to be in my makeup. In fact, that I would prefer to have something that was obtainable within the reason and rationale and facilities that I have to operate with.
So I think it is potentially obtainable, but I think it's not a certainty. And I'd say that, it'd be better, and the system we've adopted is to have stretching targets that stretches as an organisation rather than things that we can achieve comfortably. So I can't tell you we can achieve this comfortably because we can't. It's stretching. And I think that enables us to ensure that we're performing at our highest level as an organisation. If we set comfortable targets that we had every confidence we'd achieve, I'd say that, we're probably not doing our best as an organisation and for our communities.
Deputy Mayor Hutherley.
I just wanted to say thank you for this report, and just thank you to all the staff for all the work that you've done over this. I quite like what's presented to us in terms of the overall organisational key results objectives. I think it encompasses a lot of the aspirations that we have within our strategic framework. And I'm noting Councillor Percival's comments there in terms of whether we are pushing too far, but I think we should always, push, as high as we can. It indicates what our aspiration is as an organisation to be working towards the top of our scope as an organisation to be able to deliver to the community. So I'm very on board with this. I'm very supportive, and just want to thank the staff for all the work. We know that some of the metrics may need some adjustments, but I think it's a starting point. It's a baseline for us to be able to assess, and whether there are progress reports that would come through, for us to be able to assess and monitor where we're going. So I'm more than happy to move the recommendations as proposed when we're ready. Thank you.
Now, take that as moving. Do someone want to second that? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Councillor McCone, did you have a question? Just to want to speak to them.
No, I was just going to second that, but he beat me to it.
Okay,
So that's right.
Let's go. Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Hopkins.
Look, sorry, if I could just ask one question that perhaps follows on from your Mr. Palmer's answer to mine, and also comments from Guy or Councillor Percival. This report you're bringing to us the next meeting. How's it going to affect timetables and time frames? I know you had implementation objectives and certain changes you wanted to ensure occurred before Christmas this year. Is that still on track to happen?
So the adoption of the KPIs enables us to move forward, and then we'll address the envisaged timetable in the report that we bring forward to the next council meeting. But this report, if you do adopt these KPIs, enables us to move forward. The timetable is planned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nothing else? Councillor McCone.
I'd just like to make the comment that, we're in very challenging times, and sometimes you've got to challenge yourselves to get the best result. So I think it's good.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to put it. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, that is carried. Thank you very much. As Deputy Mayor said, so staff have been working on this. We know it's not perfect, but we accept that. We do look forward to working with staff on how it can be improved over time, and we will see how that goes. Thank you. and on that note, we look forward to the transformation paper coming to the next meeting where we can give the okay, because we're definitely keen and raring to go to actually get that adopted. Thank you. Yeah, we're pretty determined, that's for sure. Is that what predetermination means? Okay, right, councillors, moving on to the adoption of council's significant engagement policies, riveting stuff. So it is an important document for us. So I'm not sure, Mr. Palmer, you want to comment on this, or go straight to Victoria Vanderspet? So welcome, Victoria, and happy for you to introduce the report.
Good morning, councillors and staff. So you have before you the 2023 Waitaki District Council Significance of Engagement Policy and Guidelines. This document applies to all decisions taken by council where there's likely to be an impact to the community. And it identifies how council decides what is significant and sets out how communities can expect to be have input into the council decision-making processes. So the current document we have is quite outdated, and the new documents now meet best practice and align with the Local Government Act. So the community has had the opportunity to provide input into these documents in April this year. No substantive feedback was received from this consultation, but there were a couple of minor changes made just to ensure that the policy and the guidelines align well and can be implemented appropriately. So going forwards, these considerations will play a higher profile in council decision making, and there'll be more detailed assessments in council reports around these considerations. So council's asked to adopt the documents with or without amendments, and I'm happy to take any questions anyone might have on these. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I've got a couple, if I may. On page, these are the new document on page 53, looking at the minor changes, you've got A, B, C, and D. And I can imagine people in the community who might be a bit suspicious, wondering what that means. The removal of named shareholdings of council in the strategic assets list to provide for an agile operating environment without the need to amend the policy. That might be construed by some people to be sort of a cover-up or concealing not insignificant information. So why are we planning to remove that? That was the first question.
It's Councillor Hopkins. So the draft policy did have a number of listed items in there, the new draft policy. It was kind of recommended that things like geoparks and other things could change in the lifetime of the plan, and that would need to go through amendments that may not be necessary. So the broader term of shareholdings is quite well defined within council's operating systems anyway. And that should capture that adequately. That was the rationale behind that.
Because my other question, on the next page, you're proposing to add a variety of strategic assets, notably the Aquatic Centre, the Opera House, Public Libraries, Museum and Archive, and Gallery. And I'm just curious, when you look at the strategic assets that are there, I would have thought these ones that you're proposing to add may be significant, but I'm not sure that they're strategic. And in some instances, it's not the centre, but the service that operates, say the Aquatic Centre, and it's not a particular library, but a library service. So I'm just wondering, what is the basis for making them strategic rather than, if you like, significant? And is it likely by doing this to have any impact on our future flexibility in terms of moderating or modifying how we do things, if we need to?
So I think strategic and significant kind of go hand in hand. I think the terminology might have been a bit blurred in the past. And I think we might have previously referred to these overall as significant assets, and actually under the LGA, it is defined as strategic. And I guess with the change in the LGA some time ago, bringing all the wellbeings back in, the addition of some of these facilities in the cultural space, for example, and captures the wider wellbeing agenda.
Okay. Councillor Thompson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks for putting the report together. I just had two questions, perhaps a little bit counter to Councillor Hopkins, you know, around the four wellbeings and attachment 1 definition in reference to section 5 of the Act. I wondered whether we should actually be adding all green space, not just the public gardens, and as a strategic asset on the basis of what it delivers for wellbeing, and also the recent Helen Clark Foundation report on talking about the role of the sponge effect in urban settings. So just a question there around that. And then on page 61, down the bottom, it talks about the operation would substantially affect the operation of the strategic asset. I just wonder there whether it should say would substantially affect the operation or potential future operation of the strategic asset.
Just an initial response would be probably around wanting to create more of a hierarchy around the green space, because there's all range of what comes under green space, some of it being leased out for grazing and so forth, right through to the public gardens and obvious recreational areas and so on. So I'm not sure whether it can be adopted within this. I'm looking to Victoria for a response on that, or whether it's something to work on adding into it, perhaps, without having to do a full review. How do we approach that one?
I think any change to a strategic asset would require a reasonably comprehensive procedural thing in terms of the work has gone through. I think we might have touched on this briefly before it went out for consultation, but it didn't seem to be an appetite to broaden the scope of the green spaces in general at that time. I was just going by your steer at the time when that went through consultation. There's no feedback from the community around broadening that scope.
Yeah, sure. I guess it was just on the basis of, you know, what the definition kind of states in itself, and our obligations as a council to improve outcomes for biodiversity around the four wellbeings and potential mitigation for adverse climatic events. So that was just the kind of position I was coming from.
Mr. Hope.
Yeah, I think it also needs to be recognised that there are substantial other protections really for any for activities, changes of activities, and especially the disposal and acquisition of green spaces, particularly under the Reserves Act. So I think there's almost duplicate requirements in terms of a good process to engage with the public whenever you're going to make a change to that kind of asset. So I think there's probably sufficient protections. This is more you're just highlighting a couple of key ones rather than this is the best method to provide, I suppose, a level of protection and transparency about what's occurring in those spaces.
Yeah. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Did we address the page 61?
No.
In response to that question, Councillor Blackfoot, I don't see any problem in actually adding in current and future, because the LGA defines, the well-being of the communities as being for the current and the future. So I think I consider that to be a reasonably minor amendment in terms of the context of that. Your comments there, so I'm happy to add that in.
Thank you. This time, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to raise a philosophical question around this paper. And I think it's appropriate that we've got the chair of the Ratepayers Association sitting here to participate or to hear. But we're under pressure as a council to be transparent and engaging. But at the same time, we're charged as a council to achieve the absolute best results for our ratepayers. There are times when the two are not compatible. And I see on today's agenda, there is a report about potential development in roading space in the future. That sort of information is fine in theory, but it actually also compromises our ability in a commercial sense to get the best deal possible in some situations. And so I thought that one of the best ways of engaging with community is every 3 years when we stand up and go, re-elect us or vote us off. And so I totally get the job of engagement, but I thought I was elected to represent my ward for 3 years. And when I talk of my ward, I would just say that I am disappointed that the only strategic asset shown on the list is the landfill in Palmerston. I think there are far more strategic things in Waihemo.
I'd like to move. We add Councillor Thompson to the strategic asset list for Waihemo.
Dear strategic impediment.
Sorry, that lapses for a second. Right. Anyone else? Councillor Hopkins.
I'm happy to move the
Thank you.
When I say move the recommendations, those are the ones on Victoria's report on page 51, which the earlier recommendation recommends that we move.
They wanted to make sure you're really clear on that. Okay, and the seconder, Councillor Linwood, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll put it. Those in favour of adopting the list, please say aye. Aye. Against. That's carried. Okay, we've got item 5.3, the Otago Region Waste Assessment, and welcome Steve and Lucianne to the chamber. Hannah and I have to leave very shortly for Wellington, so I'm actually going to ask Councillor Ryan to take the chair now, if that's all right. And I've got to go and do something before we leave at 10, so I'll back out. So anyway, we'll hand over to the two of you to introduce this report.
Kia ora koutou. So today we have presented you with the Otago Region Waste Assessment, and the Otago Region Waste Assessment is it's a technical analysis that looks at what the current waste picture is for the region, what our future demand might look like, what any gaps currently are, and it also reviews our current WMMP to see if that's fit for purpose for our future waste management and minimisation. This assessment has come to the conclusion that it's not, and it recommends that we revoke that and proceed with writing a new one. And so we're here to seek your approval to do that.
Excellent, thank you very much. Questions, councillors? Councillor Cone.
Yeah, good morning. How much of this is political and how much is practical would be one question. But secondly, I'll just make some observations. So I own some stuff in Central Otago too, who run a 4-bin system. Since that's all been changed, they're cutting organic waste to Timaru weekly. You know, is it a cost that justifies a means? Will be probably the question I'm asking. And the other observation I see from just private point of view, watching the amount of rubbish tipped on the side of the road is actually increasing, and backyard burnings become prevalent again like it did in the late 90s. So I'm wondering where are we going and why, really, I suppose is my question.
Thank you for the question, and very good question. I probably just want to perhaps draw the focus to the fact that this is just a waste assessment. It's just basically a snapshot of what's currently going on and what potentially could happen. However, the outcome that this assessment is looking to achieve is a decision on whether or not our current waste management and minimisation plan is fit for purpose and whether or not we should be looking to rewrite it. The detail in terms of the activities will become a lot more clearer in the future, but this is basically just here's what's going on, here's what it looks like, and with the recommendation that we need to revoke that current WMNP.
Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor Blackworth.
Yeah, look, I suppose the question I have is, I'm curious to know whether you guys find the Eunomia report on the region's waste methodologies and systems and facilities helpful in terms of assisting us to shape our new strategy. I don't think we can escape the fact that we need one, but I'm wondering how useful or helpful you think the Eunomia report is. I'll have a supplementary question based on your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So it really is a technical assessment. So it gives us the overall picture. So in terms of understanding how we fit into that regional picture, we do find it useful. There's a lot to be explored in the further stages of this process, but as a document that needs to serve a purpose, it definitely did that for us. And as Steve said, it highlights that we do need to have a new strategy so that we're well placed for exploring where we go next.
Mr. Cook, did you want to jump in there?
Thank you. Just in reply to both Councillor McKenna and Councillor Hopkins's questions, you may recall at a briefing a couple of months ago where we talked about the future of waste, introduced you to the new waste strategy for New Zealand and talked you through the sort of sequence of steps that we now need to take and the timeframe that's facing us to meet the future legislation. This is very much sort of a procedural step. The waste assessment is part of the procedure that we are required to go through. And from the paper, you'll see that really the only way to keep the council legal is to approve option 1. So I would suggest that we don't get too hung up in the detail of the waste assessment and that we get on with the job of redrafting the WMP and put it out for consultation.
Councillor Hopkins.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Cook, and welcome back. It's lovely to have you again. And I could get immersed in the detail of the assessment because there are a number of fascinating things in there, like the government backing off on the container return scheme, the fact that there's so much contamination with curbside recycling, the apparent bias of the company Eunomia in favour of the circular economy solution, which one left of centre commentator I heard on the radio recently described as rubbish or nonsense. But my real concern about the assessment in terms of helping us is that one word in all of the pages, hundreds of pages, the one word never appears is the word cost. And a variety of options are proposed for the region. BAU, moderate collaboration, enhanced collaboration. At no point are we told what the indicative cost of those might be. And they're fundamental to us determining our strategy. And this is the question I was going to ask you guys, would you agree that cost is a fundamental consideration?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Again, those kind of considerations will be taken into account as we progress this process. And it'll be part of the WMUP review, where a number of options will be brought to council that'll have all these considerations, so you'll be able to make informed decisions around that.
Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question around the situation review and the composition of Oamaru waste. What's the level of confidence in those figures? Could you explain a bit around the methodology behind that process? And I guess when as part of this review and making reference to costs, obviously that will be set alongside the incrementally rising waste levy that's going to be, well, I think it's over the next 5 or 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We've got reasonable confidence in the data. However, you'll see from the rest of the document that is a challenge going forward that a new WMMP could address, in that we don't have a bylaw that requires our private service providers to provide data. They do provide reports that we can get some data from, and there's the swap analysis that's done at the transfer station, which looks at the composition, but there's definitely improvements that could be brought into our future planning so that we can get as accurate data as possible from all sources. And that's also part of the legislated changes, performance standards for curbside, that everyone has to report on, so that there's it's legislated that reporting framework is adhered to by everyone across the board.
Any other questions, Councillor? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to compliment the staff on the branded apparel today. But my question is, were they made from sustainable, socially farmed products in New Zealand, or are they based on some petroleum synthetic products?
These are merino, and we have actually just done another batch, and we have actually asked for organic cotton for our t-shirts, so that we're living and breathing sustainable solutions. Yeah, not sure where the merino came from for these ones, but absolutely, that's a consideration.
I might just add too that they are funded by the waste levy, not from the ratepayer. Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Councillor Percival.
Just a comment and a question. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. Reading all this is just amazing. But I'm being sarcastic, of course. I don't see it addressing the manufacturers and suppliers of goods to supermarkets, etc. Why isn't that addressed? I mean, most households know that probably 50-60% of the rubbish they generated is packaging. So I think this is full of statistics and lovely figures and all sorts of things, with no conclusions as far as I'm concerned. Conclusions are all hypothetical to me. I just don't understand why they don't address the biggest producers of waste, because I think nobody's got the guts to go against these big companies. That's about where it stands.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Percival. It does touch on it briefly when it talks about the product stewardship schemes. So some of these challenges will be addressed by proposed legislation, product stewardship being one of them. There is also a lot of work going on behind the scenes working with the Packaging Forum, and part of the standardised recycling is to phase out some of those waste streams that can't be recycled and only have in circulation what does have an end market for it. So some of that work is progressing at a higher level, and this waste assessment is really looking is just a technical document to address what we capture in a new document that will align us with those central government initiatives, so that we are doing what we can at a local government level to feed into those. And you'll note in one of the options that sort of talks about advocacy. So that's, you know, one of the roles that we could play is that we advocate for those bigger solutions to those challenges that you're asking about.
Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor McKay.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Something that Guy has raised just triggered a recollection of mine. There are a variety of proposals in the Otago Region Waste Assessment report about future actions, including a whole series of regional coordinators to do things like product stewardship, lobby the government and so on. Again, there's no issues of cost associated with those, although clearly if we were partnering in those sorts of proposals, there would be an expenditure. My question is really, would the potential employment of such people or any similar sort of regional collaborations that have been suggested in the assessment, would they be incorporated as part of our new waste minimisation and waste management plan?
Yep, that's definitely one of the options that will come before you in the coming process. And there are certain aspects of the work that we'll do in the future that the waste levy will cover. So that's all of the stuff that we're working through at the moment. So when the options are presented to you, it'll have a funding component. So where the funding can come from and how we want to structure that.
Councillor McKay.
Yes, thank you. I suppose I take on board what Mr. Cook's already said, that we've got to, by law, change it around and receive a plan and start from scratch. What I would really like to see as a guideline or a thought as a personal thought is that we think outside the square and make what's better for the Waitaki district rather than cart rubbish halfway around the country to someone else that we pay it for. Perhaps it might be a better proposal that we do it here. And that's what I'd like to think of, because the cost to me is horrific. When you're carrying rubbish halfway up and down the countryside in the distance, it may be cheaper to do it here. I think a local solution and will be a better option, and I also think that a lot of this is political, and I know a lot of it's here to stay, but perhaps we should look at those options as well.
Mr. Parnley.
So one of the things about dealing with waste differently is that some of the infrastructure required is large and operates most cost effectively at scale. So whilst there may be things we might be able to do locally, there are things that we want to discuss with our neighbours in Otago, and I agree with you in principle, trying to make sure that we don't ship waste miles and miles is desirable. And if we can agree solutions with our Otago neighbours for some of the bigger infrastructure that's required to deal with this, I think that'll be more cost effective for our ratepayers and other ratepayers in Otago. I think we do need to find new solutions to it. We've got to recognise that there are some costs with the way waste has been dealt with in the past, as we can see from the landfills that we're dealing with now. And we need to look at it in that context of how do we ensure that this generation pays for the cost of its waste and doesn't leave that cost to future generations, because we're picking up the tab now for past generations and how they dealt with waste.
Councillor Holding.
Just on page 84, just quote from the thing, that the environment they're in is fast evolving, changed and fast evolving national waste context. At what point are we going to bring our community on board to let them know the changes and what we could be in for and what could have been to us?
Yes, so some of that stuff is already in the public domain from Ministry for the Environment. In the first sort of tranche of legislated changes, which will be gazetted under current legislation by this current government, is that curbside standardisation. So part of what we need to go forward with is how we engage with our community on that and communicate the current situation and the proposed situation. So when we bring a draft WMMP to you guys, it will also have that consultation plan. But we're embarking on that work at the moment to really figure out how we effectively communicate, because it is quite a big change. And there's lots of layers in that, and we need to totally take our community on a journey with that. So walk with us.
Mr. Neil, did you have your hand up? No, Councillor Hopkins, then Councillor Thompson.
Madam Chair, I wonder if you'd allow me to move the recommendations.
Is there a question, Councillor Thompson? Or
Good question.
yeah,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, no, I must apologise. It's not a question, it's a statement. But I think we're dealing with the same issue, but with two different approaches. I fully support and understand that staff under the current legislative requirement have got to progress the plan. But as a governance group, we also have a responsibility not to lay on our back and put our feet in the air, but go back to central government and tell them that this is a load of rubbish because we're already operating a better model than what they're going to impose on us.
so Councillor Hopkins.
Well, I'm happy to move if you'll accept my request to be allowed to do so.
I will. Is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson. So I'll put that to the meeting or
Speak to it.
oh yes, you can speak to it, yes.
Look, I just want to reiterate that I think Councillor Thompson has summed it up. We have to do this at the moment. The election in October may mean we won't have to, but we probably should be rethinking the waste minimisation and management strategy anyway, because it's time to do so. But I do stress that this is going to have a significant, talking as much to the community as to ourselves, this is going to impose significant unacceptable costs on us, and it's going to impact the things we want to do because it's something we're being told we have to do. And I really would urge you and ask officers, please, when we develop the new strategy, okay, factor in some of the evidence provided in the Otago Region Waste Assessment, but for heaven's sake, try and give us some solutions that are minimal cost or least possible cost. And I find the total absence of any cost estimates in that waste assessment bitterly disappointing.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to take the opportunity to reply to Councillor Hopkins's comment there. Yes, I fully support those comments. It is a large piece of work, this, and you'll recall from the briefing the deadline that is looming, which is the 1st of January 2027. And so officers really need to get stuck into this piece of work because there are many steps to it and a lot to unpick to be able to present you with suitable options for your next round of decision making to go to the public. So yeah, there's a lot to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any other speakers? No. So I'll put that motion to the meeting. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. All right, so moving on to the endorsement of the Waitaki District Council Transport Activity Management Plan 2024 to 2027. Mr. Hope, would you like to introduce this one?
I'll actually pass over to the other two officers to introduce and discuss this item.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Krishna Tapper, your interim roading manager, and signing today to be the not interim roading manager. So that's cool. Pass the credit check. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us today about the submission for the greater NLTP. So we're in the stage where we're required to submit the draft proposal for the local plan to then feed into the regional and the national plan. On the second page there, page 309, I've got a diagram showing the time frame with a little arrow in a box saying this is where we are in terms of the two stages that we need to submit. So the first stage of this month is the continuous program. So that's what we would normally call our maintenance, operations and renewals. And then next month, we are required to submit the improvement program, which is the bigger and better things if we want to do anything over and above, not just replacing like for like. So for the example, the Kakanui River Bridge may well fall into that category. And we've had some discussion before about where to put council officers and the consultant's time and emphasis in terms of options to further investigate the detailed numbers. And so that's given us further background on page 310. The direction chosen was option 3, which is slightly enhanced from what we're currently doing, saying that we acknowledge that there's some areas where we haven't been able to invest quite as much as we need to maintain a good level of service for our ratepayers. And then on the following page, we've got the likely costs over a 3-year period for all 4 options, because as part of the business case submission process for Waka Kotahi, we still have to provide options in dollars for, even if we're aiming for option 3, we still need to give the examples and how that fits across the range of options. Then essentially the options considered is that we can do nothing. You don't have to endorse us submitting a plan, but if we don't submit a plan, then we don't get any subsidy. So I don't recommend that. Option 2 is that the councillors today endorse the submission of the draft that we've got prepared. I've got a very high level summary included within the report, but the actual submission is hundreds of pages long, so I haven't put that whole detail in here. And it's only at draft stage at this point. Or option 3 is that you endorse this as is, but then also ask that we make additional changes before the final submission, which is required in December. So there is still time, and that is likely to occur anyway, even if it's not the option chosen today. It just means that you don't have to specify what changes you want today. So therefore option 2 is the preferred option, that you endorse it as provided. Not knowing how people like to digest information, I've tried to present it in graphs, colours in one version, and then in tables in another for people who like to see numbers. That's on the following couple of pages, just outlining the first 3 years, and then also to understand how that fits into the bigger picture, so that we're not saying we're asking for heaps of money or a little bit of money now and then heaps of money, hiding it later. That's all shown there. And then it also had requests to give information for the low cost, low risk types of projects or their priorities, which is in the pages 320 to 325. Happy to answer any specific questions. Otherwise, I'll take it as read.
There's any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendation. I would just like to take the opportunity to point out to members that the costings are very much a projection, a crystal ball gazing exercise almost. It's not a locked in concrete scenario, but if we don't have this plan in place and funding becomes available from Waka Kotahi, we can't maximise our opportunities. So I'm fully supportive of the recommendation.
Councillor Percival, did you have a question?
I'd just like to acknowledge all the work and effort that's gone into this. It's taken a lot of preparation, and hopefully we'll succeed in what the document's for. Just intrigued on page 311 of our agenda, you've got the top 5 risks being drainage, sealed surfaces, resilience, bridges, traffic, mainly addressed as deferral of renewals. But we have a program which is costing ratepayers between 5 and 7 million annually, and we have a roading contractor, repair and maintenance. Surely the risks are alleviated when every day we're addressing the 5 points that have been put out as the highest risk. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, you're correct. These things are being addressed and are a key part of the maintenance contract. They're still broadly speaking in terms of the expected climate change, continued extreme weather patterns, that is still a significant risk to a low volume spread out network. Yeah.
And Councillor McCone.
I'd like to just second Mr. Thompson, and on the basis that well, congratulate, as Councillor Percival said, the amount of work that goes into this, and I think we've got to put a stick in the sand and start from somewhere, and this is a pretty good indication of where to go from.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions, if I may ask them, to Josh and Kushla. Are we proposing to actually offer option 3, the enhanced strategy and policy approach, knowing that if it's accepted by Waka Kotahi, it's going to cost our ratepayer, we're going to cost a total of $23 million a year? That's question number 1. I suppose if I can ask all 3, when will we have a chance to ask you some questions about some of the big cost increases in the detailed budget you've got from page 30? I mean, I noticed sealed pavement, network and asset management, sealed road resurfacing, safety improvements, massive hikes. And I would like it somewhat to have some opportunity to tease that out with you. And my third question is, given the extreme weather events you've talked about, in our budget proposal to Waka Kotahi, is it adequate to only allow 100,000 a year for coastal road protection? Don't we have to actually come to the party with more on an annual basis now? Look at what's happened south of Morday Bay right now.
Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, thanks, Madam Chair. Can I just reply on behalf of the roading subcommittee? We are already engaged in that process with roading. Councillor, so the questions you're asking are being or will be discussed through the roading committee before they actually come back to full council.
Well, as long as we all get a chance to actually either attend the meeting or ask questions in some form, oh, sorry, Madam Chair, through you. But that's fine, but none of that's been made available to the rest of us by the committee, and it's not included in this report.
Sorry, just to clarify that, there is no meetings being held at the roading subcommittee at this time. There is just discussion going on with staff. There is no meetings that have been scheduled, notified or held. Thank you.
Madam Chair. I might answer the first question there and hand over to Kushla for some of the more technical elements. With respect to selecting option 3, yes, that's the option that we're seeking endorsement from council for now. Understanding, yes, that is an increase in investment in the roading portfolio that we're requesting from both council and Waka Kotahi. That isn't the option the council do have to select, but it is the option that we believe represents the best management of the asset that we can possibly afford. What we're currently doing as far as maintenance and network improvement goes, we are gradually falling behind with our current investment levels because of escalating costs. We do need a larger increase than we had at the previous LTP. We requested a higher level of investment then. We didn't get it from Waka Kotahi, so we're requesting it again now. Whether Waka Kotahi decide to endorse that or not is up for them, but we are seeking that from council today.
All right, Councillor Thompson, Councillor McCone, you still there?
Sorry,
Wasn't Kushla going to answer the other questions?
Do I need to press a button?
No.
Okay. Yes, sorry, to answer Councillor Hopkins' question. So yes, the request is that the option 3 be the official endorsement for the draft, but we are submitting all options as required by Waitaki. So we have to submit all 4. And we have more detail about why option 3 is the current preferred business case. The submission document, which is just over 200 pages long, has all of the detail about each work category and why there are projected differences. For example, as you said there, sealed road resurfacing. We've got an explanation about cost trends, what our condition of our current network is like, why we think we're not keeping up with the squares, and what the market conditions are like. What we've had a very detailed report from Infometrics to project the likely cost escalations for different types of products. So there's bitumen cost escalations there, separate to gravel sourcing, fuels and labour changes, all the other things that impact how the tender prices come back to us. And so, yes, it does sound like a massive jump going from about $17 million a year to 2023. Yep. But keeping in mind there was a 20% escalation last year alone. We're not predicting that that will continue, but would be unwise of us not to accommodate at least what we know has occurred already and allow for some more change over that time. So yeah, with the business cases by section, all that information is just being finalised with the consultant at the moment for submission at the end of this month. So it will be available to all councillors to see that when that's ready. So that was question 1 and 2. Yes, so all of these line items are draft and very happy to consider increases or changes to individual lines such as, say, the coastal roads budget. At the moment, we don't have a value set for minor events. And some councils choose to put an annual budget in there where within the first $100,000 of any one event, whether that's a big rain event or a high sea or a flood or something, that Waitaki expects you to absorb that within your normal program, which can be a separate line item saying minor event. And then if the event causes damage of greater than $100,000, we can then submit an additional application for funding, which is at our normal funding assistance rate. So that'd be 57% here. I'm still thinking of her, and always 52. And that after over the full financial year, if there were multiple events or they were so big that we end up spending more than 10% of our annual budget in emergency works, we're then eligible to apply for an extra 20% funding assistance rate. So sometimes there's we'll always code the stuff to that, but yeah, at the moment we've got $0 put aside for that because we've just will absorb it.
Thank you. We're going to need to wrap up now to move on to morning tea. So the motion's on the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. And we will be taking a brief adjournment and we'll be back at 10:30 with agenda item 6.7. All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're moving into item 6.7, the Observatory Retirement Village additional financing request. Just acknowledging the attendance of Observatory Village Life Care Limited Chair, Mr. Peter Robertson, and his fellow directors and representatives. I will hand over to Mr. Hope to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you. As outlined in the report, council has a long involvement with the development of the Observatory Retirement Village. And so this is not unexpected request given the detailed development plans that have previously been provided to council. So really it is, in contrast to a lot of the other requests, this is a relatively short-term facility for a limited amount. And it's really just to help address really just a cash flow issue that the company has identified that may occur over the next really 2 years. In the recommendation, it is for a slightly longer period than requested by the company, and that's just to give us a wee bit of a buffer for given how the construction sector is at the moment. And also it's suggested a slightly higher margin than previous arrangements. And that's just really as acknowledgement of the fact we're in far more volatile sort of financial conditions than we've previously considered. So it's just to make sure that the ratepayers are no worse off in this arrangement, which has always been the intent from the start. So, but really I'll hand over to the team from the Observatory Village just to talk about the stages of the development, provide a bit more detail about what the funding is required for, and then I think sort of very happy to respond to questions, and we'll sort of to direct them to whoever is most appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm supported here today by my fellow directors, Claire Kearney, behind me, and Michelle St Martinsteig, and also the village manager Scott Eliff, and the financial advisor for the whole village project, Katrina Hollywell, to my right. So we should be able to answer any questions. I guess to some regards we're a victim of our own success. We're far further advanced than we ever thought we would be at this stage after only 5 years of being open. But we're faced now with about $18.5 million worth of development. We made the decision about 12 months ago or maybe a bit longer actually, to change 3 villas to a 10 block apartment. And the reason for that was that we've got even now over 40 people on a waiting list for apartments. We've currently got the original block of 12 and then another block of 20, all full. And whenever there's a vacancy, Katrina immediately fills them. The issue with doing that is it's $4.5 million to build the next lot of apartments. And unlike the villas where we can stage them and then sell them and get the money back in, we can't with the apartment block. So it's $4.5 million money out until they're complete and people are moved in. At the same time, to really help the whole project go forward, we need another community centre over in stage 2, because those people can't fit into the existing one over the hill. So we need to provide that facility for them, and that's $2.5 million. So we've got 4.5 and 2.5 million. At the same time, we're building a number of villas, about another 11 villas, which again will be sold and are pretty much all sold as we build them, but we can't get the money in. So we've done a cash flow analysis, which I think you guys have all been privy to. And there's about 3 or 4 or 5 months during the project where we see that we're going to be short of funds. We've looked at avenues to alleviate that, and all of them were detrimental to the business because we've got fixed price contracts for these things, which we'd lose if we didn't go with, say, the community centre. So we think the best way forward is to get some short-term funding. You'll see on the spreadsheets that we've provided that we believe that we will be, by the end of December next year, all sold down, all paid back, and have quite significant money available to pay the first 1.5 million in June the following year, and also to commence distributions to the trust, who will then make their distributions to the community. I know it's been a long time coming, but this is the last big hurdle that we see of needing a lot of cash flow for the business. And after that, we'll see some benefits to the community flowing via the trust. So I think that's all. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Peter, as I understand what you've told us and what the report indicates, you're essentially asking for bridging finance that may or may not be drawn down in whole or to an extent, subject to the possible delay in people who want to move to the village selling their own properties in a constrained property market. So this 5-month period where you see some shortfall, to what extent do you envisage the bridging finance facility you're asking us to provide being employed or used in that period?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of assumptions and we've tried to be pretty conservative, but for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, we see drawing down around about, I think it was $1.8 million. But what we haven't factored into any of these forecasts are resales of existing homes, villas. There's the first 18 villas that we sold. I think besides one are still got the original tenants or people in them, the licensed occupier in them, and the significant capital gains tied up in those. So if, for example, some of those were sold between now and June next year, we wouldn't need any of this facility, but we can't guarantee that. So we're being prudent in just making sure we've got a facility in place.
Any other questions, Councillor Thompson?
I'll ask the obvious question. Why come to us as an option against going to a normal bank?
Well, we consider you our normal bank. Right from day one, the funds have been drawn from the council. It is community owned. In a normal situation where this was bank funded, it would be a telephone call and we get a facility in place. We've got the latest valuation just coming at 57 million. We've got $16 odd million worth of equity, so there's no risk for a bank. However, because of the situation we've got, you guys have got securities. You would have to formally agree to a bank being involved. The bank wouldn't be all that happy about being second. And also we've got covenant trustees who really look after all the licensed occupied people. They've got to get approval as well. We've got to get approval from them as well. So it becomes messy. It's not impossible, but it's messy.
There is that risk there if we did go to the bank and rather than just the 2.5 million, they'd say, well, we'll take it on board, but they want the full loan facility, which would take the council out of it. So we don't want to go down that path either.
Councillor Hopkins.
May I ask a question through you, Madam Chair? May I ask Mr. Hope a question? I notice that the proposal here is that the interest rate charge will be based on an agreed market-based rate, plus a margin of 2.5%. Are you satisfied that 2.5% is a sufficient reward for our ratepayers?
Yes, I am. But I mean, that's sort of my view of the situation, and it's clearly why it's one of the items in the recommendation. But given just the nature of the facility and its relatively short term and limited amount, it seemed a reasonable margin.
Okay, if there are no other questions, would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Hopkins.
Happy to move, Madam Chair, if you'll accept.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Linwood. Would anyone like to speak on? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I apologise, but I would, given that this matter was raised in the public forum this morning, I think this is a classic example of where perceptions and reality can be in conflict. You've heard Mr. Robinson cogently and credibly explain the current secure financial position of the trust in the village and why they have come to us rather than to a bank. This has been a stunningly successful community development. It has contributed very successfully to the community and the district's economic development. It has enhanced Oamaru's reputation as a location and destination for people to come to and live in and stay in. And in this instance, a short-term bridging facility, which may or may not be drawn down in full, subject to the market factors that Mr. Robertson has again credibly discussed, will reward ratepayers with money they wouldn't have got otherwise. So to my mind, it's a win all round. And that's why I would hope the Residents and Ratepayers Association and others, having considered the matter more fully, might find themselves able to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So I will put the motion to the meeting. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So now we will jump back to item 6.5, electoral system to use for the 2025 elections. That's the apartment. If you could put your microphone on, Mr. Robinson.
This is the apartment. No, this is the community centre. It's a community centre. And this is the apartment block, front and back. This will have sea views and mountain views. Thank you.
Okay. Just so I've got it there anyway. If you haven't been up there, what is in white up here is basically what's been under construction over this last year. So they're just being fully completed now by September. So where it's green down here is what's going to be completed over the next 2 years. So we start at this end, moving around in groups of 3 to 5 villas. So basically that's us completed at the end of there. So we're not far away.
Yep. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so jumping back to item 6.5, the electoral system to use for the 2025 elections. And I will invite Mrs. Bailey. Someone to introduce this one.
So periodically, the council is required to review the electoral system that it uses. There are 2 alternative approaches, and the council must formally decide which system it wishes to use. That system would then persist for the next 6 years, so 2 electoral terms. I'll take the report as read.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Have you read the report, Mr. Palmer?
Of course, could you not tell from my introduction?
We're page 326 for anyone who is just catching up. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I must just take the opportunity to say what a magnificent job you're doing of chairing the meeting, and much improved over the previous chairperson who's no longer with us.
Point of order.
I don't expect that to be minuted, but I do hope that he is possibly watching online as he travels.
Point of order's been called. You'll have to let the chair rule on that.
I withdraw the point of order.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Do you have a question?
It's terrible that we're here at council and being able to enjoy ourselves. Well, whilst making critical decisions for our communities, I'm happy to propose that we accept option 2 as recommended.
Option 2.
Well, there's a summary of options.
The recommendation on page 326.
Yes, could we go to the report's recommendations, please? It's either decide to retain the first past the post, that's recommendation A, or decides to change to the single transferable voting electoral system, that's option B in the recommendation. It's one or the other.
The reports just set out options that don't quite correspond with the recommendation. So option 2 corresponds with recommendation A.
Right.
Councillor.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I was getting ahead of myself in the report. So I will make it perfectly clear that I'm supporting and moving for the retention of the first past the post system.
Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Hopkins.
I would thoroughly endorse that and second that motion.
I was simply going to do the same, but Councillor McCone has done it for me.
Any further discussion? Councillor Hopkins?
Well, look, again, I think to the extent that there may be some public interest in the matter, from us, we're entitled to choose, and there's been no public appetite expressed, as far as I'm aware, for a change. It could and would be problematic if it were done in the Oamaru ward, but not in the other wards where only 1 or 2 councillors are elected, because apparently STV supposedly works better in wards where there are multiple numbers of persons elected. I think we're proposing to retain a system that has been reasonably popular and certainly encouraged higher voting participation than has been the case in metropolitan areas, some of which have adopted and employed STV, which I think has the potential to be confusing. There will be a possibility of a petition. If 5% of residents and ratepayers say they want us to consider STV for the next election, then so be it. But and that decision will be notified. This decision today will be notified by the 19th of September. So my view is we've done, I think, a sensible thing. We've responded to the fact that the silent majority aren't clamouring for change. We essentially are endorsing our ability to choose, as long as Wellington will allow us to do so. And people do have an opportunity to actually challenge this if they wish. So again, I think it's a win all round.
Okie dokie, well, I'll put the motion to the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Okay, so moving on to item 6.6, management of vegetation on unformed legal roads. Invite Mr. Ho, or no, Ursula to introduce the report.
Kia ora. I'll take the report as read. What this has come about is we've had an unusual situation which we're resolving individually, but we don't currently have a policy stating that this is how we deal with trees or other vegetation that's growing on unformed legal roads. So we don't need to have one. There is a national guidance document which we can simply adopt or say that that is what we apply. However, if we wish to have more specific details, we can. And then I've also given another option of saying, in addition to having one or more policies that cover trees on roads, which can also be unformed legal roads as well as the maintained ones, we've identified that we currently have a rural unsubsidised maintenance budget, which was essentially the ward's discretionary fund, which we don't currently have guidelines for what that should be spent on, and whether that is something that the council want to be involved in making it a formal guideline. So that's option 2, saying if you want to have an additional guideline on that. I'm happy to answer questions. I've put in attachment 1 there, which is the full guidelines for the management of unformed legal roads. So that's the national guiding document. However, on the previous page, which is page 335 of your agenda, actually no, 334, I've just got the one snip that's relevant to this if you only want to look at one page.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Holding.
When I first read the report, thanks, Kusha, I was wondering the need, he's saying we've only had one case ever in regards to this policy. I mean, to go towards the need to looking at doing a policy, or is there more stats that?
Through the chair, I'm not sure about the long-term history, but certainly the recent history is one that's quite unusual where because of the lack of awareness within multiple departments about this being a guiding document, we indicated to people that we wanted to help them out, and then it's like, oh, actually turns out we've got absolutely no liability, we don't need to spend any money, and we can maintain this very firm stance of actually we don't maintain, operate or manage unformed legal roads. They are essentially absorbed into where they're fenced, and it's up to that property owner to manage and maintain.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, Trishla, except we haven't got a policy, but you have, I think, included the Act here. And on page 350, section 632 of the Act says that we have a duty, local councils have a duty to ensure roads are free of obstructions and damage. That Act goes on to say, or the Public Works Act also provides an additional authority for roading authorities to require the owner or occupier of any land adjoining a road to trim or cut down vegetation that may obstruct the lawful use of a road or damage a road or be detrimental to a road. Now, I'm familiar with the particular case that has triggered this, and I've had a long distance look at it, and the concern of the person who's raised the matter with us is their property, obviously, but the trees in question could also, if they were to fall, damage the road. So doesn't the Act in section 632 give us either authority to remove these trees ourselves on the grounds that the unformed road could be damaged by them, or conversely require the property owner adjacent to the road to do so on the basis that something could happen to the road should the trees topple? I'm just wondering if we need a policy rather than just 632.
So through the chair, that's option 1 is saying you don't need a policy because we can refer to this. In terms of damage to the road, if the trees in that situation fell over, the road wouldn't be any more damaged in terms of its functionality or usability as a road than it currently is. So it's non-trafficable now. If a tree fell over, it would still be non-trafficable. So yeah.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Blackford.
Thank you. What's the objective of setting the policy in that? Are we trying to define what's legally required, or how we best, for want of a better phrase, do the neighbourly thing with our constituents. The concern I have reading this document is that it's all about what we're legally required to do, as opposed to how we can best interact and engage with our community. And I think, I think there's a definite difference between the two there. And when we talk about our objectives as an organisation and such, like, it's all about partnering with the community and working together. And then we come up with things like this that say what our legal requirements are and suggestions around doing the minimum. And I understand it could open up a big can of worms in terms of all the issues out there, but I would like to see us trying to come up with a balance between, what the guidelines are and how we can deliver a sensible outcome for everyone. And perhaps that is the intention behind option 2, but I just want to confirm that is the intention.
Excellent. There was a thumbs up there. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just following on from Councillor Blacklist's remarks. I agree, but I think the problem may be bigger than what we realise, in that there is a huge number of these roads existing within the Waitaki district. And somewhere along the line, we actually need a policy so that we can work through. We don't want to create policy by precedent and then be committed to a course of action. So I'm in favour of us developing a policy, but at the same time being prepared to work with our ratepayers to try and seek equitable solutions, which I think can be better done if it's based on on a policy that we have to work with.
Councillor Blackler.
Yeah, thank you. On the back of that comment, do we actually have any, do we know how many kilometres of ULRs we have in the district? And perhaps that's an opportunity as well, doing an assessment in that space of if they serve any purpose in seeking to strategically get rid of some of them.
Through the chair, so currently we don't know the extent of length of ULRs, and there isn't a centre line that can be easily mapped. So we could set up a project through GIS to individually map but they're not searchable because they're not their own titles or anything like that. So it would be quite an extensive project. It may be worth doing long term, but it's not data that we have currently available. And I just want to make a clarification. Sorry, a few questions earlier. Councillor Hopkins referred to an act. The guidance document is not it's not an act. It's not. It's the governing document for the nation, but it doesn't, to my knowledge, have any act status. But it is New Zealand's guidance document, and the intention of recommendation B saying if we were to develop our own policy referring to this governance document, the guidelines for management of unformed legal roads, that it gives us the opportunity to say how we want to engage with our public, how we want to support them without giving almost too much. I feel like the reason why we're in one of the situations at the moment is that we've tried to be very helpful without realizing that we actually should have had a firm no at the start and then seeing what we could do rather than going, oh yes, absolutely, we'll sort it out for you.
Just further to that, with respect to the potential liability of unformed legal roads and council's stance in the management of them, whilst we can't quantify the legal length of unformed legal roads, we do know that there's a lot of unformed legal roads which are used for plantings for shelter belts, which are used as stock routes, so on and so forth. A lot of the neighbouring properties often use those as shared spaces to enable movement of stock, shelter belts,
etc. Council taking on the liability for the management and the maintenance of those is a significant liability, which is why we'd want to work through a policy that's specific for us and takes into account the varying needs of both the community as well as the guidelines that we have, so that it's right for our district rather than just guidelines from central.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, just to carry on from what Josh was saying, he makes some very valid points. So Corridale has got a huge amount of trees planted along the road verges and in little bits of waste ground that was actually done by a past county chairman here. And they've got to the stage where they're actually, some of them being a nuisance and a cost to the system. And secondly, the mention of shoulder belts on the side of the road. For some strange reason, our prevailing winds out there are northwest, southwest, and you'll find that they're put on the eastern side of the power lines, because if you get trees across the power lines, it's so as option 2 is to me is a good option, but it's a bit of thought might be needed in how it's worded.
Any other questions, councillors? In that case, can I get a mover and a seconder to the report's recommendations? Councillor Hopkins.
Well, I'd like to move, but very slightly differently. I'd like to move that council agrees to have a process. I'm not sure we need a policy, so I'm moving. I'll test the mood of the meeting. The council agrees to have a process for management of vegetation on or adjacent to unformed legal roads in accordance with etc. And 2 would remain as it is. So that's what I'm moving.
Through the chair, why would you include adjacent to unformed legal roads? That would be private property.
But yes, but if you look at, sorry, to answer through you, Madam Chair, if I may, 632 cites the Local Government Act and the Public Works Act, saying that we have a duty to ensure that vegetation, trees and so on don't damage roads, duty to ensure that trees and planting near a road doesn't damage the road, and that we can also direct owners of properties adjacent to a road to remove trees if it's likely that they will. So that's why, I mean, and the issue you've talked about doesn't involve trees on the road, as I understand it. It involves trees near the road. Okay, so it's on the road. I misunderstood. That's fine. Well, in that case, I'll withdraw on or adjacent to, just make it on.
So can you just clarify what your final wording was, Councillor Hopkins?
Well, I'm moving that council agrees to have a process for management of vegetation on unformed legal roads, having had the clarification from Kushla that we've just received, and everything else. All I'm doing is deleting the words "have a policy" or
policy and.
Yes, correct.
Is there a seconder? A question, Councillor Holding.
The policy could, once developed, could take into consideration the things that Councillor Hopkins is moving, and that will be what's looked at, weighing up pros and cons.
Councillor Thompson.
I support the intent of what Councillor Hopkins is saying, but unfortunately that intent then leaves the process open to the interpretation of whoever's in the chair at the time, whereas a policy clearly outlines a procedure to be followed. So I would oppose that, Councillor Hopkins.
Madam Chair, it's lapsed for want of a seconder anyway, so I suggest somebody else move something else.
Is there anyone who's willing to second Councillor Hopkins? No, so then in that case, we'll move back to the original recommendation.
Before you do that, Madam Chair, can you just rule that alternate motion has lapsed for the want of a seconder?
So ruling that original motion has lapsed. Is anyone wanting to move the original recommendation? Councillor Thompson and a seconder. Councillor Blackler. Thank you very much. Put it to the meeting. Are you any discussion on that? No, so I will put that motion to the meeting. All in favour, please say aye. And against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so that is the end of the public session. Can I get a mover that we move into public excluded? Councillor McCone and second Councillor Linwood, thank you very much. So that's the end of the public session and we'll be moving to public excluded very shortly. Thank you to everyone who's been present in the gallery today, watching the live stream at home for your participation. And I need to put that also to the motion to the meeting. All in favour of moving into public excluded, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried.